Hello and welcome to Sharing Wisdom. I'm excited that you're here today. I'm your host, Angie Wisdom. And today I have Wally Bressler here. He is a best-selling author and has a new book coming out this month that you're going to love, The Six-Figure Agent. We'll talk more about that. And also the creator of the Trigger Sales System. So he helps people get over the call reluctance so that they can get on the phone, break through their beliefs, and make some money. So Wally, happy to have you here.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. I know you've got a great audience, and you talk to a lot of folks that I deal with every day, so it should be fun.
Yes, I love when I was reading your intro and reading some of your, thoughts and beliefs around this, the fact that you say everybody is in sales.
Yeah. You're 5 years old, you want a cookie. You're 10 years old, you want to stay up an hour late. You're 16, you're going on a date, putting on makeup or cologne, your application to get into school, your resume for a job, looking to find somebody to marry. And all sales jobs, right? Some of them not as overt and don't necessarily follow the traditional, sales. There's a sales, process, a system for everything. Granted, it's not quite the same thing, but you're continually putting yourself out there. And interestingly enough, what this ties into is, the reason about 60% of salespeople have a problem with getting on the phone or getting in front of people or getting in front of a video camera because they have this strong need to be accepted or approved of.
Mm-hmm,
right.
Absolutely.
And so that prevents them from doing that. And so that's when you're not comfortable with who you are and need approval, it's hard for you to sell yourself. Right. So it just it ties in that way. Right.
Yeah, you don't want to jeopardize that approval status, right? Like if you don't ask, then you can't get rejected, and therefore you stay nice and comfy and safe. So absolutely. And like you said, it is so important to realize that everyone's in sales. So as you all are listening right now, if you're like, no, I'm not in sales, this podcast isn't for me, hold the phone for a second here, because
no pun intended, right? No pun intended. Yeah, hold the phone,
I didn't even catch that.
Yeah, that's how my twisted mind works, right? So hold the phone. So,
love it. But it's almost like we can relate this to communication in general, can't we? Like having those hard conversations that maybe you're reluctant to have with people that you have relationships with or coworkers or anybody. There's reluctance kind of from that standpoint, correct?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I've done a lot of research. I had call reluctance for 10 years myself. So, but, here's the thing. The same reason people have trouble getting on the phone is the same reason they have trouble going to the gym consistently, is the same reason they have trouble sticking to a diet consistently, is the same reason they can't stick to their calendar, is the same reason that they don't stay on their goals, and is the same reason they stay in relationships with people that they shouldn't stay in with. I'm saying it all comes down to that self-worth, that self-esteem, that belief in yourself, that stuff we're talking about. And basically, when you do not think that you are worth it or that you're not valuable enough to do those things, then you will not put any effort into doing something where you think it's not going to work out for you or you don't think you're worth it, right? And so a lot of people fear rejection, they fear confrontation, they fear conflict, and so they're not going to have the hard conversations, which you have to have when you're a salesperson. You got to tell somebody, I can't lower my price, or we can't deliver it that way, or whatever. You have to have those hard conversations. You have to ask hard questions too, which is all part of sales as well. So it definitely impacts a large portion of people's lives, not just getting on the phone, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have to bring up what you just said, because I'm really curious here. You named so many things that, of course, listeners and you and I both hear from people all the time, like the same thing that requires you to stay disciplined. And you didn't use discipline, to go to the gym, to do all these things with consistency. I relate those to discipline. Like, do you have the discipline to continue with that consistency? And you said something really interesting where it stems from your self-worth. So how does the discipline and self-worth kind of come together there?
Okay, well, there's a couple of parts. So the first part is, when you have discipline, you are doing something because you believe it's going to be worth it for you, right?
Okay.
Right? You deserve it. You're worth the outcome. You want the outcome. Like, not only am I going to do it, but, I want to look good. I want to feel good. I want the whatever it is. I want the money. I want the house. I want the vacation. I want, or just the, the self-satisfaction or the acknowledgement or whatever it is. You're willing to be disciplined to make that happen. But that comes with self-assuredness. That comes with confidence. That comes with belief in yourself that, hey, if I get up and go to the gym, I'm worth it. That I want to take care of myself because I believe I'm worth it. And if I don't feel like it's going to work out, I'm not going to put my time and energy into it because I don't want to be rejected. Here's the interesting thing. I couldn't figure out for the life of me, Angie, why people didn't want to be held accountable. It's like, why don't people like accountability? I mean, everybody wants accountability until they get it, right?
Right.
Like, why are you texting me to ask me to go to the gym? Because you told me you wanted me to, that's why. And then you're like avoiding it. Oh, my phone's broken. My dog ate my phone, whatever. So,
right.
But the whole thing is that it's a self-esteem issue. I don't want to look bad to you. I don't want to look like I'm failing. I don't want to look like I can keep or that I don't measure up. So I'll tell you I want accountability, and then you give it to me. And then I realize that I'm not going to feel good if I let you down or if I feel like, right. Does that make sense? And the funny thing about it is that you're actually making yourself look worse by saying you want accountability and bailing, right? Than showing up and not doing well. The whole point of accountability and all those other things is that you're supposed to look bad until you look good. Right.
Yeah, I love learning.
Right. Exactly. Right. Zig Ziglar said this. He said something that's worth doing is worth doing right, but it's also worth doing wrong until you can do it right.
I haven't heard that. I love that.
Right. So that, and the thing is, but if you grew up a perfectionist and a procrastinator and you had, all those issues from when you were a kid, it's not going to resonate with you. You're just going to hide from anything that causes that pain. So, and ultimately that comes down to getting on the phone, going to the gym, eating well. If you have low self-esteem, you don't feel good about yourself, and you don't feel that you're worthy of a good relationship, and you're a people pleaser or whatever. You'll keep somebody in your life, even if it's miserable, just because that person's still there. And then unfortunately your poor little sad mind is like, at least I have somebody. I'd rather have somebody who's a complete jerk to me than not have anybody at all, because that validates that you're acceptable because you have somebody around, even though they're a complete idiot, which is sad. I did that too. I mean, very badly. Almost cost me my life. So, yep.
Yeah. So, I want to talk about that a little bit more, because I know that where you are today didn't just happen by chance. You definitely had your own trials and challenges and experiences that you went through. But before we get into that story, I think it's important for people who are listening in to keep them here is the fact that there's a lot of people who help people in sales coaching and help them break through these beliefs or claim to, but you're not just another presenter of information. You've actually lived this life. You have had massive success in the real estate industry, to the point where you have taught other coaches how to build their business and, having $5 million plus annual revenue from it. So can you shed a little light on kind of some of those accolades and awards, and toot your own horn for a minute to let people understand, where are you coming from? What kind of experience do you have when you come on the show and talk to us about how to be better?
Right. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. So, I've been in the real estate industry for 25 years. And in my first 14 months in the business, I sold 72 houses. And and then I helped build one of the most successful Coldwell Banker offices in the world. We were, I think for 4 or 5 years straight, we were number 3 in the world for buyer-controlled sales. And then I started coaching in 2001. And then, basically in 2006, I got connected with a company. If you're a residential real estate agent, there's a strong possibility you know who Jay Kinder and Michael Reese are. We built a very successful real estate coaching company. We got over $5 million in annual revenues. And so, last year I published my first book, and I'm co-authoring another book that comes out on June 22nd. I was interviewed on Times Square today in Times Square. Back in, I think it showed on national television last November. Just interviewed about what I do to help people overcome the challenges that they have there, and I think I've done a little over 40,000 one-on-one coaching calls and live presentations. Wow. So, yeah.
So you're the real deal. You've actually lived it. You've actually done it. You didn't just take the information and are spitting it back out to tell people how to do something you didn't do. Yep. And I think that's important for people to understand. I appreciate that.
I've got an axe to grind with people who call themselves coaches too. There's a lot of people out there giving people some bad advice. Right? Bad advice.
That's a whole nother conversation, right? You can be a coach by just calling yourself coach.
Yeah, coach. Hey, listen, I sold 5 houses last year. Let me coach you. Yeah, I mean, and the same thing for you. Not everybody's an investment advisor. I got lucky with my day trading account, and I made a few $1,000, and now I'm going to tell you how to squander your retirement like everybody did in the .com bubble, right? So, but you remember that, right? Oh, I'm a day trader. Yeah. Oh, my $800,000 retirement is gone in 3 hours. Great, good job.
Right. But, I was a day trader.
But I'm saying you probably obviously you did well, right? Or you wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
So fair enough. And that's great. And some people have it and some people don't. I wouldn't day trade, just like I wouldn't cut my own hair. You know what I'm saying? There's people that are experts for that sort of thing, and I trust them. So, but there are people out there that, I know one coach, he does all these videos on how to become the GOAT in real estate. He's sold like 10 houses, and that just troubles me a lot, giving people, and this is the thing for me, Angie, is that, getting into real estate is a huge commitment. It is a monstrous commitment. It's not like going and getting a job selling cars. It's not like selling copiers for a company. You're like literally, you're stepping out onto the limb. You've got, you have no homes to sell. You've got nobody to sell homes to. All you have is time. And very few people can tell you how to invest that time to get the best results for yourself. They don't tell you what's coming on the pike. And that's why 80+% of real estate agents don't make it to the first renewal of their license 2 years later. Because they don't get good advice from people. Yeah, exactly. It's unfortunate.
And
so anyway.
I'm a big believer in the fact that, yes, you can learn the mechanics and you can learn some of like the tools, but you can't just take this cookie cutter approach that everybody else uses and expect to go out there and be really successful with it. Yeah. And I think that's what happens sometimes with coaching is like, well, this is how I do it. So just do it exactly like me. And you're different in this sense that, yes, it's really about breaking down what's going on with that person and those triggers. So I do want to talk about that.
100%, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So let's jump into that a little bit, and then we'll kind of pull in your past a little bit to reference there. But what is it? Like, what is the number one reason why people have that call reluctance or conversation reluctance, I would even call it, when it comes to selling or having those conversations of opportunity?
I mean, it really comes down to approval, fear of rejection, fear of failure is what it comes down to. Fear of not looking good. That's really what it turns. It's really revolves around that, if that makes any sense. And so they just don't want to put themselves in a position. It's funny because, sometimes call reluctance looks like I get like sweaty palms, dry mouth, sweaty pits, pounding heart, light head. Sometimes it looks like complete avoidance. Like I don't even think about it. I'm not even going to do it. Sometimes it's like, well, it's too early. It's too late. I'm going to bother them. Sometimes it's like, oh my God, my scripts aren't ready. And I don't know my suit, and I got to wear these shoes, and how can I set an appointment? I don't even know my presentation yet, or I can't even write a contract. It's like getting ready to get ready thing. So it all looks like that, but it all comes from that belief in yourself and what you think you can and can't do, and ideally, I call them hidden identities. Basically, your belief about yourself is formed by the time you're 7 of what you can and can't do and who you are. And by the time you're 12, it's locked and loaded, and so. Wow. If something happened where you were younger that, created that belief system, I'm not good enough, or I'm a perfectionist, or teaches you to procrastinate or whatever, you're just going to avoid those things that cause you pain for the rest of your life. And you're just going to reinforce that avoidance strategy, whether it's procrastination, perfectionism, drugs, alcohol, cigarettes, food, sex, whatever it is, pornography. And you're going to continue to just use those avoidance strategies to not deal with the pain. And then you're just not going to put yourself in position. And so but that's why so many people get into real estate, because, they want the 3 freedoms. They want freedom of time. They want freedom of money. They want freedom of location, but they don't know the cost that it comes with is a significant cost. It's a tremendous amount of work. Lots of emotional management is required, humility, being willing to ask for help. A lot of us, I would say as a country, we're super resilient, but also, my belief in life is your biggest strength is also your biggest weakness. We have such a need to prove to people that we can do everything ourselves that we'd rather try and do it ourselves and fail and not let anything good happen than ask for help and succeed. And that's a big issue in the real estate industry.
Oh, I can so relate to that. I mean, I was actually
I bet you can.
Yeah. Personally relating to it, I always thought I needed to be super independent, right? So it's like, I drove myself to a hospital for surgery, because I didn't want to ask for help. And it's like, what is that? Fortunately, I broke through all that, obviously, and have created a great business of helping others do the same. Yeah. But, we have this thought that like, we can't ask for help. That's weak, and then we're dependent upon other people and what will become of us. But, with what you said as that, like, it's kind of cemented into you by the age of 12, and you're saying, and if you continue down that path, then you're always going to operate like that. But obviously, you don't have to continue down that road. Yep. So what is it that breaks that system that says, no more am I worried about what other people think or failing or judgment or anything to change that course?
So, awareness is the first part, right? You can't solve any problems that you're not aware of. You can't hit a target if you can't see it. But that awareness has to usually come about as a result of some sort of pain. For some people, for me, it's rock bottom, where there's nowhere else to go. Either kill yourself or go up. You know what I'm saying? I guess you could bounce along rock bottom, but that sucks. Or, as far as I'm concerned, we all have points in our life where we can get the leverage, where we can experience that pain and be like, I want better for myself, right? And then I'm willing to be vulnerable because I'm not enjoying life, I'm not getting what I want out of life. I mean, it took me, let's call it 40 plus years, the majority of my life to get to the point where I was literally an hour away from, put a gun in my mouth. So, I mean, it took me that. And then, one of the things that I've one of my goals now is to make sure that nobody has to hit rock bottom in order to go ahead and create the life and business they want for themselves. So, and I think it's just a matter of, saying, okay, I'm sitting in an office and I see, 15 real estate agents, and there's people out there like, I'm smarter than that person. I work harder than that person, but they don't do the things they need to do to be successful. You know what I'm saying? And so, you got all these agents that are working till 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning. They're procrastinating all day. And they finally get to do the work they do. So they're going to bed at 2, they're getting up at 7, getting nothing all done. What a horrible, miserable existence.
Yeah.
And that's because, they just don't commit to doing the things that will make you successful, like getting on the phone and doing videos for social media and talking to somebody, asking for help and role playing and doing all those things that are actually going to bring dollars in the door.
Yeah, I literally, before our conversation, I was with a client who's in real estate. And I said, you'll have a hard job in the sense that, look, you could create smoke and mirrors for a long, long time. And everyone around you thinks you're working and you can keep lying to yourself about it. And nobody knows any different. You don't have that boss. You don't have that accountability necessarily with somebody else. So there's a tremendous amount of discipline, and self kind of integrity that you have to have in the picture in order to keep going. You talk about having to sometimes hit rock bottom or have this pivotal point. And in your book, Tragic Hero, Picking Up the Pieces, that was kind of your story. You share kind of a memoir of what rock bottom was like for you and where that ultimately led, where you said, you were minutes away from, taking your own life. So share with us a little insight on kind of what you went through and what was that turning point for you?
Yeah. So, I always preface my comments by saying my parents were good people. They just weren't good parents. And usually, when you're a kid, the treatment, the rearing you get is one of three things. It's exactly what they got. It's the polar opposite of what they got, which is also dysfunctional. You know what I'm saying? If your dad's mom was a helicopter parent, then your dad will be a helicopter parent, or he'll be completely out of the picture, right? He won't pay attention, or you get something in the middle. Well, I don't know. You know any Italian people?
Yeah.
All right. So, the level of the three types of communication in Italian families is you get hit, get yelled at, or you get food. I mean, that's communication. So, and food's used as a weapon. So, my parents grew up in Italian families in New York City. Lots of yelling, lots of hitting. My dad's mom was not very nice. She was a mean person, very emotionally abusive. And so, my parents had me, and my mom worked and my dad didn't have a job. So he watched me, and drank during the day and smoked. And so, but one of my punishments when I was 3, 4, 5 years old was to be put to bed without dinner. And so that created in me a very big fear of being hungry. And so I ended up having a binge eating disorder as a result of that. My weight got to just under 500 pounds at one point in my life. So, and because I was just afraid of not being able to eat. I remember my first day of first grade, I remember we were doing snack time. They brought the milks in and we opened up our lunch boxes. I had David Carradine lunchbox, Kung Fu. And everybody else ate their snacks. I ate my snack and my lunch and my afternoon snack right there. And so, almost my whole life. And so, I was sexually abused when I was 10. And then I started looking at pornography when I was 11. And then when I was 12, I started having, engaging in sexual activity and actually having sex. And then I was bullied like mercilessly for that whole time. So by the time I was 14, I low self-esteem, low self-worth, anxiety, a lot of fear. And then script kind of flipped. I went from being the person who got hurt to the person who did the hurting. And, I kind of lived a double life. Like, it's interesting because, if you looked at me from the outside, I graduated in the top 18% of my high school class. I won awards for football in high school. I went to one of the best colleges in the country for liberal arts. It's like 13th in the country. 4-year letter winner in football. Had made $100,000 a year by the time I was 28. But underneath, I'm addicted to pornography. I'm addicted to sex. I'm addicted to money. I'm addicted to food. And I'm just destroying my life. And so, I ended up was unfaithful to my wife several times. I've probably blown about $5 million in my life because, to me, having money and giving it away or doing something to show people that I was worthy. I bought, my $430,000 house. I bought a BMW, threw lavish parties for my kids just to get that acceptance. And then I was doing some real estate investing in 2005 and 2006. And that was a wild, wild west, if you remember. And
I do.
So my former business partner lied at about $15 million worth of mortgages. And even though I wasn't trying to steal money, I was still there and I had to accept responsibility. So I spent 366 days in federal prison on one count of mail fraud. And so, you would figure that being there would be the wake-up call for me, but it wasn't. And so, and I got out of prison in 2014. I met a woman in early 15, so desperately wanted to be loved, wanted a great relationship, and wanted to do a better job. And so I basically let every red flag under the sun go by, and it was super toxic. I should have left 100 times and I didn't. And then about 4.5 years later, earlier she had accepted an engagement ring from me, said, yeah, I'll marry you. Couldn't get her to move here to Texas. She lived in another state. And so I broke up with her. And 3 days later, I found out that she had lied to me, but everything she had ever told me was actually still married the entire time we were together.
Wow.
And so I was like, okay. And then a month later, the pain was almost unbearable. And I was like, I can't keep making all these bad decisions. And so I decided I was going to take my own life. And at the time I was sitting in a chair and I'm like, how am I going to do it? I'm thinking about it. And I'm like, I think I'm just going to call the police and run outside with a knife or something and have them shoot me. And, God was like, hey, remember when your dad died when you were 23, your sister was 19, your brother was 17, like you got 4 kids, bro. You can't do this. And so I'm like, okay. And so then I started fighting, you know what I'm saying? And it was excruciating, but
divine intervention right there.
Yeah, literally. Right. But so what happened was by going through everything to resolve my issues, I learned what caused me to have call reluctance. And I learned that, if, you are sexually abused, emotionally abused, physically abused, if you were bullied, if you were, if you started looking at people, because I was poor growing up, I knew that I had different clothes than other kids. I knew that they had better lunches than I did. Nobody told me I was poor, but I convinced myself I was poor, or if your parents fought a lot, or if your parents never fought, or, that happens and that triggers your fight or flight instinct. And for most people, it's flight. And they hide and they run just like I did. And then you just avoid pain for the rest of your life. And anything that creates that pain, that's going to put you in a position where you don't feel good enough, where you don't feel like you're worthy, you're just going to avoid like the plague, and you desperately want to go and do things. You want to be successful. But, John Carson calls it your gremlin, and taming your gremlin. That gremlin comes up and says, come on back. We don't do that. That's not us. So come on back. That's what self-sabotage is. You're like, you get to the point where your brain's like, this is not what we do here. So let's blow this up and go back to where we're comfortable and let's, hide again. So anyway, that's the Reader's Digest version. Hopefully that wasn't too long.
No, well, I think it's so, there's so many part pieces in there. One, thank you so much for being vulnerable. I think that's a big key.
My pleasure.
And people need to understand that. And we so often, you're talking about, self-worth and belief that comes from being vulnerable as well. And so I appreciate you doing that. But it's also like, look, people with the really great life right now didn't always have the really great life before. And it's such inspiration to say, like,
thank you.
Shit, Wally. You hit a lot of rock bottoms, if you ask me.
Yeah, most people's lives are like this. Mine goes, so.
Yeah. But, it was like a slide for you. You were on like Typhoon Lagoon, and the big water slide going straight down.
Yeah,
so. I think that's also another great thing that people need to understand. I hear from people all the time, like they don't want to dig up their past, but you've got to have the awareness of what has happened and what's transpired in your life. The past is not just the past that you get to cover up. You have to know in order to see like where this is getting in your way and where these blocks are coming from.
Right. Well, it's interesting. I have this saying that says, if you don't deal with it, then you're going to have to deal with it. Meaning whether you want to or not, it's coming up.
Pretty simple.
Right. I mean, it's basic, right? If you don't deal with it, then you're going to have to deal with it.
In some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, right. You can run, but you can't help it.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
I think we don't realize that our brain is
pick what you want to deal with. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. Hey, if you don't want to, listen, if you don't deal with it, then you're going to deal with it, but it's going to be forced upon you. Your brain, our brains are self-preservation mechanisms, right? They want to keep us safe. It wants to keep us at peace. It wants understanding. And anything that you don't resolve, your brain's like, deal with this, deal with this, deal with this. Every time you feel a negative emotion, that's your brain saying, hey, we got a problem. I mean, look, if we got a cut and we got an infection, we wouldn't think twice about putting, Neosporin on it, right? But we get a cut, like we get sadness, we get anger, we get depression, anxiety, push it down. Or, whatever, avoid it, but it keeps coming back up. It's going to keep coming back up. And, it's interesting, Angie, people are like, oh my God, COVID created so many mental health issues. COVID didn't create any mental health issues. What it did is COVID exacerbated all the mental health issues that people had that they've been avoiding for years, And so
that's an interesting outlook.
I mean, it's just, because what happens is we keep our foot on the lid of that can or whatever that is. But as soon as something tragic or traumatic comes up, our foot comes off because we can't focus on both. And then it's like Pandora's box. It's like, so that's why I say, if you don't deal with it, then you're going to have to deal with it. But left unchecked, what left unchecked, you get massive anxiety, you get massive depression, you get PTSD. And eventually you're either going to hit rock bottom and you're going to want to kill yourself, or you're going to have to fight. And that's unfortunate, but that's where you're headed if you don't deal with it.
For you, like you had this experience, you hit rock bottom, you had divine intervention, things changed. Like, how does that tie into then what you overcame and like the success that you created? How did you use that to break through every belief that you ever had before?
It was horrible. I mean, undoing, 50, basically 45, 46 years of stuff. It was excruciating. I mean, I talk about in my life, in my book, Kelly, counselor I worked with, and I mean, she saved my life. And, it was hard. I mean, there were days, like first several months, she's like, we'd get off the call. She goes, you're going to hurt yourself. I'm like, no, I'm not going to hurt myself. There were some times I'd have to think about it, but it's one of these things. And this will make sense, right? I mean, there's two types of pain, right? There's the pain of staying the same, which is just kind of like, kind of goes along. And then we have moments of, I want to change this. But it gets so hard. Let's go back to that. Right. And then there's the pain of change, which is acute, very painful, but it's much shorter span, if that makes any sense. So
right.
You just have to be willing.
It's temporary.
Yeah. You just have to be willing to fight through the pain. And this is why for some people like me, it has to be rock bottom. And I remember laying in my bed, and it was Easter weekend, and I could not get out of bed. I was so depressed. I was so sad. And I'm like, I can't keep living like this. I mean, people were coming by my house to see if I was still alive. My kids were like, we don't hear from you. And I just couldn't do it anymore. But we can go and find that. Like, that pain's there already for everybody. Everybody had something they go back and look at. But I just was willing at that time to be vulnerable, and go and get help. I think one day, you'll vouch for this. I think you can vouch for this. Like, you can't be your own coach, right?
No, absolutely not.
You can't be your own coach. You can't be your own therapist. You can't be your own counselor, because you only have your own thought processes. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yep.
Right? I mean, you learned
100%.
investing. You learned investing, but you didn't learn it all from books and the internet. You had to get some strategies and some stuff from other people, right?
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so you can't coach it. We can't fix our own problems. We just,
Yeah.
So
well, that's like, what wasn't it Einstein who said, the mind that creates the problem can't solve the problem?
100%. He was much smarter than I was, and that's why he came up with that great quote.
But I think, I was having a conversation the other day with somebody, and we were talking about discipline, and he was referencing, I don't know who said the quote, but something to the extent of, the pain of the discipline now, or the pain of the regret later never changing.
Mm-hmm. You'll suffer the pain of change or the pain of regret, but you're going to suffer one of them.
Right. Pick your poison there. I tend to believe, I focus a lot on mindset, and I tend to believe that one, and I questioned him in this, and I said, well, does it really have to be
Jim Rohn?
Why don't we, Jim Rohn? Okay. And I was like, why don't we reframe that? Why do we have to make discipline like pain? And similar to what you were saying earlier, when you said, you're going to have to kind of deal with this stuff. It's going to be painful, and you have to get over the fear of making these calls and the rejection. For you, there's a much deeper process. Part of my mind goes to, okay, fear lives in the future. We need to get back to the present moment. I believe that our mind can kind of, avoid that, and we can manipulate our mind to choose our thoughts. I'm just curious, when you hear that as far as mindset mastery versus really kind of breaking through those limiting beliefs and barriers, where do the two come together there?
So very good point. Absolutely is, you control what goes into your mind, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, when we're kids, our brains are like little CD accounts or CDs, right? CDs, you can put money in, you just can't take it out. That's what happens. People make deposits. You're bad. You're stupid. You're dumb. We make deposits. I'm not good enough. Nobody teaches us how to take it out, though. It's all deposit, deposit, deposit. And so we never learn how to deal with it. And so we let any emotion or any feeling that comes up take root like that and do whatever it's going to do, right?
Right.
So
right.
We can choose any emotion we want to in any moment, but we've got to stop and slow down first. And this is where mindfulness comes in. And I teach people mindfulness, right? They teach you to literally, you have this feeling. I mean, every emotion has a physiological response to it. Every single one of them, because it's through your nervous system, right? Happiness, sadness, anger, ecstasy, whatever, all have physical representations. The problem is most of us ignore them, right? T. Harv Eker, he calls it TFAR. It's like thoughts, feelings, actions, results. I get a thought, and then there's an emotion, a feeling comes up, and then I either take action or I don't take action, and I get a result. Well, if you're me, you go you go thought or trigger, then you're like, let's eat, let's drink, let's watch pornography, let's waste some money. And then bad stuff happens and you get bad results, right? If we just take a minute and just let that feeling come up and be like, oh, okay. So the first part is let's have global awareness. Why the heck am I not able to pick up the phone? Why the heck do I feel nervous when it's time to go pick up the phone? Let's identify that first. And then once I identify where it comes from, oddly enough, your brain's like, thank you. And it starts sending you this is what I feel. This is what we feel. This is what we feel. Please recognize this. And so then as you start working through it, all of a sudden you feel that anxiety and you go, okay, now I've got situational awareness. Man, I'm feeling anxious right now. I'm tightening my shoulders. Why am I doing that? And then, so your awareness, and then you define it. That's anxiety. Then you identify, okay, I get anxious when it's time to get on the phone. And the reason is because of this when I was a kid. And then you work on mindfulness. You do some square breathing, or I like people to go to the mindfulness movement on YouTube. There's a bunch of 5, 10, 15, 20-minute mindful meditations. And what you do is you stop and you let that feeling up, Kristen Neff, who's an expert on self-compassion. She's like, you've got to let that pain come up and you've got to sit with it for a second and identify it so then you can just let it go. But, so the whole point of this is that we get to benefit from neuroplasticity. The more you identify the pain when it comes up and then let it out, the more you're telling your brain that, hey, when this pain comes up, we just don't, we don't deal with it. We don't deal with it. It's just, we're not going to let it bother us. So you can literally
we're not going to give it the credit, right?
Exactly. You can literally rewire your brain because you've been telling your brain, hey, when this pain comes up, we just let it go. And eventually your brain takes over for you and then you're not even going to feel it anymore. It's really cool.
Yeah.
So to your point, yes, I can feel any emotion I want, you know what I'm saying? And then quite honestly, I just got to stop and let the other pain out and then feel the feeling that I want. And eventually your brain's like, oh, I got this.
Yeah.
And it happens so much faster than you would think.
It does. Oh, it so does.
Weeks.
Yeah. I mean, and you see the instant, even in that moment, you can physically feel the change when 100%. You choose that different thought. So right if I kind of tie that up and wrap that up for us, what I think I hear you saying is that in the beginning, yes, you have to understand where that's coming from. You have to deal with that to some degree before you can start kind of mastering your mindset around it, because we've got to get out of that autopilot kind of reaction to it. And I literally, like I was just talking to somebody earlier 100%. And it's like, what is that? You start scrolling on Instagram, but it's like, we're not even looking at okay, why am I avoiding this? We've got to ask that why so that we get the answer.
Mm-hmm.
And then once we have that, then we can really kind of go into that just tweaking our minds. I say like it's doing another rep, right? Every time we have the opportunity to do it, we do that another rep, we get a little stronger, and eventually you're like, I don't even think about this anymore. It's
You are
just
wise
the
beyond
new
your
way
years,
that your
my
mind
friend.
thinks.
You are wise beyond your years. Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the first things, basically I tell my clients, the first exercise I take them with, I'm like, hey, go get a couple of note cards. And then I say, you perfectionist, go get a piece of paper and cut it in half. Doesn't have to be note cards. Like, I can't do this. I don't have note cards. Like, you know what? I don't care. Whatever you have, just find 2 somethings you can write on.
Yes.
And those you have to write on and say, listen, what's the source of my call reluctance? Or why do I procrastinate? Or what is the source of my perfectionism? You take 2 note cards, whatever, you put them on both those pieces of paper. So I don't, based on what time of the day you're watching this, if it's early in the day, just do it and keep one with you. Put one on your nightstand. And then, when you go to bed, read it a few times. And when you go to bed, your brain's going to go, okay, because at night your job of your subconscious is to make sense of everything. And if you ask your subconscious a question, it's going to answer it. And you'll probably wake up in the morning and go, oh my God. And honestly, it's interesting, Angie, as we've been talking about this, there are people whose brains have already gone back and found out what it is. Because your brain's just dying for you to know. But then once you know, then you're, so that's what I have my folks do, so.
I love that. Okay. Nice. So get out the note card or have a piece of paper and start writing down that call reluctance.
Yeah. What question, whatever, you know what I'm saying?
The fear.
What is the source of my call reluctance, my perfectionism, my procrastination, my inability to go to the gym consistently, my inability to stick to my calendar, what's happening? And then your brain's going to tell you, it's going to go back. It remembers everything we've ever tasted, touched, smelled, heard, or seen. So you just got to go find it.
Amazing, isn't it?
It's in there. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So I'm no neuroscientist.
So that's one of your first steps.
Yep.
Yeah, you're starting to sound like one, though.
I know. I'm not. Yeah, I know enough to be dangerous, but you wouldn't want me operating on you. I can tell you that much. So
yeah.
Nope.
We'll stick with just turning people into that 6-figure agent in 1 year here.
Yeah, right.
So let's get back to that. As far as you've given us that tip of like, here's the first thing you have people do, but what is it? I know you can't share all of it in this short amount of time.
I'll tell you all 5 steps. It won't take long.
Okay, good. You have this trigger.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you have the trigger sales system. And this is what you do with people to take them from this call reluctance to being super successful in their industry, sales. And I always like to kind of bring it back to communication too. If you feel like you're not just on the phone. But 100%. So 5 steps for us. What are those 5 steps?
Okay. Number 1, you got to go and find out what the cause is. You got to be willing to go and look at it and accept it and figure it out.
Yep.
It's interesting. One of the biggest causes of call reluctance is people whose parents never fought in front of each other. Or in front of them.
Oh, interesting.
Because what do you not learn how to do when your parents never fight in front of you? You don't learn how to deal with conflict or confrontation.
Right, yeah.
If everything's leave it to Beaver at your house or Brady Bunch at your house, you get out into the real world, and then you go get a job somewhere when you're 15 and your boss says, come on, stop, and then you're like, oh, right? Because you never built that thick skin. You never built that resilience, So
now I know why I was so good at calling right out of the gate.
Well, if your parents fought a truckload too, that didn't help either. But
yeah, well, that's a whole other set of issues.
Yeah, that's it's like we can diagnose you later. It's as a thank you to you and everybody who's watching. They can hop on my calendar for a half hour. I'll tell them how they can do that, and I'll help them identify what the challenges are for them. Like 15 minutes. So if you want a free call, I'm all yours. So number 1,
perfect
awareness.
Pause. Yep.
Number 2, we go from global awareness to situational awareness. So then it's awareness, define, identify, and then mindfulness. So I'm feeling this right now. Okay, this is anxiety. This is where it's coming from and why I feel this anxiety. And then I'm going to do some box breathing or some square breathing and just let that pain come up, and I'm going to let it pass. And the more I do that, the more I tell my brain not to let that stuff bother me. Step 3 is we rewire our brain. Hal Elrod's got a great book called The Miracle Morning. And it's a great book. Big fan. I'm fortunate enough to, be friends with Hal. He calls them his savers. So it's, silence, which is meditation, A for affirmations, V for visualization, E for exercise, R for reading, and then S for scribing, for journaling. 10 minutes a day. You literally start rewiring your brain and telling yourself the stuff you need to hear and working on that. Okay. And then next it's I like Daniel Pink's idea of staying motivated, like really trying to figure out what you want. Daniel Pink's like, the 3 things to keep you motivated towards anything is autonomy, mastery, and your why. So what does autonomy look like? When I'm living my best life and I have choice over whatever decision I make, what does that look like? And in order for me to be there, what do I have to master? What do I need to learn how to do? And for everybody, one of those things is learning how to master your emotions and not become emotional reactive. Not let emotional reactivity rule the roost, because there's so many things on the way to that are going to try and knock you off course, and you're going to, So, and then lastly, your why. Figure out your why. Simon Sinek and Find Your Why, great formula. It's 2 things. Number 1, it's usually rooted in some sort of pain. It's either in this pain you don't want to feel, or that you don't want to feel again, or you don't want somebody else to feel, because you need that leverage, right? You need that I got to have that emotional attachment. I'm a big Zig guy. He says you're not fully involved in your goals until you're emotionally involved. So you need that emotion, that pain. And then the second thing is that you have to be able to contribute something to impact the outcome over it. So people are like, hey, my kids are a why. My house is a why. My cars. No, your kids are a who. Your house is a what. Retirement is a when. What do you have to do in order to help your kids? So, I'll give you an example. My kids, I don't want them to grow up anything like me when I was a kid. You know what I'm saying? I don't want anything like what I went through. I mean, they've already faced enough resilience with their mom and I getting divorced and me going to prison. They faced more by the time they were 13 than most people do in an entire lifetime. So they're like cockroaches and armadillos. They are resilient. But I kid. But here's the thing though. My kids, one of the things I do is I'm very intentional about the conversations that I have with them. And they know that they're responsible for their emotions, right? They know.
Yeah.
They know we've had this conversation. You did this. I'm not in control of your emotions. They know that. And I've taught them from a young age, and I continue to reinforce with them that, hey, come talk to me. I'll teach you how to process your emotions. And, and so they, at the young age, I mean, they're not great at it. I mean, sometimes I'm still not great at it, but for the most part, when something comes up that starts to knock them off course, they bring themselves back in, and they limit the amount of emotional reactivity. But the thing I had to contribute is I had to first do it for myself, and then be able to spend time with them and be intentional about the conversations I had. So my kids aren't the why. The why is I hated being so emotional for 40 years. Ruined relationships, ruined jobs. And so what am I doing? Well, I remember how painful it was to freak out and start fights in restaurants and do all kinds of dumb stuff like that. And I want my kids to do that. So I intentionally have conversations with them and teach them stuff so that they don't do that, as an example.
I love that. So
Something like
5
that.
steps right there. Yeah. And it's understandable. And it's what I call the inner work, and the work that you can't skip. Yes. And I always say people want to work on the how pieces instead of the who pieces. And you've got to start with you.
100%.
My book that's coming out is The Non-Negotiable You. And it's all about you've got to tune into yourself. Yes. You have to do that inner work. You have to seek yourself for the answers and lead yourself. And that's everything that you're talking about here, which I love. The rest of the stuff, like the sales, tactics and scripts and rebuttals, like all of that, that's easy to learn. Those are just learnable things. This is the real work that you have to do before you can ever use those things. So thank you for sharing that. I think it's so important for people to realize, look, you can't shortcut yourself. You have to tune into yourself, do the work on yourself if you want to be able to utilize all those other amazing tools out there that are going to make you, the top selling agent. So, and
to your point, I mean, clearly you're very intelligent, quite astute, super intuitive. I mean, obviously that's why people hire you to help them. So, you just made an interesting point, is that, no amount of scripts and dialogues, no amount of calendaring, no amount of role play, no amount of any of that stuff is going to solve the problem for you. So many people, you go Google how to overcome sales call reluctance, set a goal, find a big why, find a role play partner, I mean, those are all mandatory things, but that's not going to make you overcome the challenge. I have people that call me that say, hey, listen, I've got my agents, they don't want to get on the phone. What kind of bonus should I give them? What kind of competition should I run? I'm like, there's no amount of money that's going to make the person that doesn't want to get on the phone get on the phone.
Yeah.
You could put $1 million on the desk next to them, and many people would just sit there and want to get on the phone, would be so afraid of what's going to happen that they couldn't do it. You can't pay that person enough money to do that. But interestingly enough, if you work on yourself for 8 weeks, it'll change your life forever. It'll be gone. and never come back
So
again.
true.
It's crazy.
Never. Yeah, you just rewire it. I love it. So you have already shared so much with us, and I appreciate that. But I always
Sorry if I went long, by
guests,
the way. Sorry if I went a little long.
You did not go long at all.
Okay.
No, good stories, valid information, and so much for our listeners to take away.
My pleasure.
But I do always like to know, on top of everything you shared, I always ask my guests, what is the most, important piece or influential piece of wisdom that you've ever received from somebody else?
It's funny, and I'm sure you get asked this question too, and I'm going to ask you when you're on my podcast, so you can get ready now. But
okay.
People ask me all the time, Wally, what's the one thing that separates successful people from people who aren't successful? And I used to squeeze my head. I'd be like, God, one thing? I mean, but I finally figured it out. The difference between successful people and unsuccessful people is that successful people do the things that other people don't want to do. They do the things that they have to do, and they push through the fear and the pain to do it. So not only look, success is boring. I mean, seriously, becoming successful in sales is boring. Prospecting 2-3 hours a day, calling people again, following up with people, same listing presentation, same buyer presentation, time after time after time, right? It can get boring, but repetition is the mother of skill. And when you get to the point where you can say anything at a moment's notice to make something work, that's great. But in order to be successful, you have to do the things that you don't want to do. You got to do the things that other people don't do. And then you got to be willing to push through the fear to make that happen. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Love it. Good stuff there. Spoken
you.
From a place of real, genuine authenticity. Someone who's lived it and used it, people.
Literally.
Yes.
Literally. Yes,
thank you for all that you have imparted on the audience. You all, this is Wally Bressler. Check out his website, triggersalessystem.com. He's got a course coming out to help you be that six-figure agent. The book comes out this month. I'm excited for that as well. So
thank you.
Give him a follow and check him out and break through those limiting beliefs and the triggers that are holding you back.
Thank you so much.